The Super Soco TC Max has been out for a little while, although there is the night edition that's been recently announced. You might have also seen it rebranded as the Vmoto Soco or the Vmoto Super Soco TC Max, and that's because Vmoto now owns Super Soco. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, it can be found for roughly £4,200, and on paper it does actually look like a pretty interesting bike, with a rough quotation of 60 miles of electric range, a top speed of over 60 miles an hour, and also a bike that actually does look the part as well. Now, you should also know that you have got a 2-year warranty on the bike itself, while the battery has got a 3-year warranty. For you to ride the bike in the UK, you have to be over 17 years old, hold a CBT or an A1 license. So to kick things off, I thought I should talk about its electric range. And here you have got a 2.7 kilowatt hour battery pack that's planted right in front of you. It actually sits where the petrol tank would be. So it actually feels quite natural and therefore still gives you that sort of nimble approach of the bike and feels very familiar to a regular petrol bike. Now, the manufacturer claims that you'll get roughly 60 miles of electric range, and in fact, via the different modes that you can select on the right-hand side over here, you can actually go up to 81 miles, which I do think is actually quite unrealistic, because in my mixed riding test, I netted between 40 to 50 miles of range. Now, that was actually in the level 3 mode. Now, level 3 mode effectively gives you the most amount of power and also top speed, and as such means that range is affected. Now, with that in mind, if you were to be riding at, let's say, 20 to 30 miles an hour, and you were going to go pretty slow and you're not going to be using the accelerator all that much, then you might actually be able to net north of 50 miles or 60 miles. But I can't really attest to that because that's not the range figure that I attained, and the majority of my riding was done on country roads and inner city drives, which were at a minimum of 30 miles an hour and up to roughly 50 miles an hour. Now, for you to charge the battery pack, there is a charging port that's found on the bike itself, and it will take you roughly 3 to 4 hours to charge from 0 to 100%. Now, you do also have the means of removing the battery from the bike itself and effectively going on a clockwise and anti-clockwise motion on the key, where there is a small little area outside of the bike. And then you turn off the isolator in order to mitigate any sort of electrical issues from occurring. And then you use the key within the battery part compartment in order for you to unlock the battery. And then you have to slide out the battery, of course, having disconnected it from the bike. Now, the battery comes in at 22 kilograms. So yes, it is removable, but it is actually quite heavy. So just worth bearing that in mind if that's something you're going to be doing regularly. Now, equally, if you're going to be charging up the bike, let's say, for example, at home in an apartment or at a workplace, the charger unit itself is actually quite loud. I clocked in roughly 21 to 23 decibels of volume, and it is actually a fan. In fact, here's a little demo of how it sounds. So yes, indeed, the battery pack is actually pretty loud, and that might be actually a deal breaker for certain individuals. It's something I've pointed out previously in other bike reviews, including from the likes of Super Soco. And this is because effectively some people want to be charging at a workplace or of course overnight, and given the charger is pretty loud, well, it's a little bit hard to ignore. So moving on, we get on to performance, and here the manufacturer claims you'll get 125cc performance, although that is a lie, because as soon as you do look at the rated power, it sits at 3.9 kilowatts. That equates to 5.2 horsepower. It has, however, got a peak of 5 kilowatts of power, and that equates to 6.7 horsepower. There's also 12.9 newton meters of torque that is at least rated via the motor itself. Now, I actually had the bike tested using Race Logic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 3.31 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 5.69 seconds, 0 to 50 miles an hour in 18.01 seconds, and 30 to 50 miles an hour in 12.32 seconds. Indeed, it isn't exactly the nippiest bike in the world, specifically when you get towards its higher speeds, but nonetheless should certainly suffice for most consumers. Now, something I thought I should point out is that the speedometer was actually grossly off. Now here I was using the Performance Box Touch with a GPS unit, which gives me a pinpoint accurate reading. In fact, when I'm even in a regular vehicle, when I'm driving, let's say 60 miles an hour, the GPS unit will actually show me 57. That's why if you point a radar gun towards a vehicle, it actually will clock in a little bit lower. Roughly 10% is the kind of leeway that most manufacturers try to work with. But with the TC Max, it was so far off. To put it into context, when I was doing 20 miles an hour on the GPS unit, it was showing 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, and 50, 55. So yes, every single time it was roughly 5 miles an hour off. But where it actually caused most concern was when I reached its top speed of roughly 53 to 54 miles an hour, the speedometer kept on climbing despite my speed not actually increasing. So much so that I actually saw a peak of 62 to 65 miles an hour on the speedometer, while my actual speed in reality via the GPS unit was being clocked in at around 53 to 54 miles an hour. I do think this is actually pretty poor, because when it comes to actually riding safely, you want to make sure that you're actually doing the speed limit. And yes, indeed, in this respect, you'll never be exceeding the speed limit, but not actually knowing how fast you're actually riding is never a good sign. Speaking about riding at 53 to 54 miles an hour, the bike itself felt really steady while riding on the motorway. I didn't face any sort of wobble, and even while faced with crosswinds, I had plenty of confidence. It's worth bearing in mind over here that the bike on review had Michelin tyres fitted, which do not come fitted as standard, so just worth bearing that in mind, and of course that could have contributed to the overall riding experience. Elsewhere, the bike itself was actually really fun to go around winding country routes. I'm not someone who is a motorbike racer or someone that goes really low around corners, but for a casual rider like myself, I felt really engaged. The front axle gave me a good source of connection, and therefore I just felt at one with the bike itself. The ergonomics actually worked out really well for someone like myself who is just under 6 foot. Similarly, the TC Max is supremely comfortable to ride, and this is thanks to the fact that it's got USD front forks and a rear monoshock setup. The combination means that it soaks up a lot of the anomalies, and even when you're faced with small potholes, you can actually glide over them. Going over speed bumps also is a non-issue. This is actually one of the most comfortable electric bikes that I've ever ridden. So kudos to Vmoto and also Super Soco for creating a really comfortable bike. Now this is also due to the fact that you've got high density foam material that serves as the seat. This also extends off to the pillion, so you can have another person who is sat behind you, and they will also be left pretty comfortable as well. Now what isn't as impressive, however, is the overall braking performance. Now don't get me wrong, it will certainly suffice for most consumers, specifically if you're doing lower speeds, thanks to the fact that you've got front and rear disc brakes. But when it comes to doing an emergency stop at higher speeds, it is a little bit lackluster. I actually did this in a safe manner on a country road, and I just felt that the overall braking performance could have been improved. Furthermore, you've got no ABS whatsoever, which also doesn't really aid when it comes to the overall traction when you're coming to a complete standstill. Moving swiftly on, we get onto its design, and here I've got no complaints whatsoever. I do think it's actually pretty stylish. It's got a modern twist with that sort of old school vibe, thanks to the fact that you've got the headlights at the front with no sort of windshield. Now, of course, there are certain accessories that you can purchase, for example, the RNG accessories that were actually provided with the TC Max, which I didn't actually fit on, but it was actually nice to see that you can actually fit on certain accessories that would actually complement the bike. And in this respect, there are certain other things that you can, of course, add on. Now, the bike itself weighs in at 79 kilograms, that is without the battery. So if you do include the battery into the equation, it's roughly 101 kilograms. Now, there is no real storage with the bike due to the addition of the battery, although the small little area that is found within the main compartment will suffice, for example, for a power bank or, for example, your smartphone. Now, there is a built-in alarm with a keyless ignition where you go on and off. It's actually quite handy, and therefore means it gives you a bit more peace of mind when you're parking up the bike. However, it is disappointing that the LCD display is rather basic. You've got no sort of customization or integration with the likes of Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. Equally, you've got no USB for charging, so therefore you'll actually have to carry around a power bank, and that seems a little bit counterintuitive, but I have seen online that certain people have done certain modifications. Nonetheless, I can't really comment about this, and also can't really recommend it due to it potentially voiding the warranty. You have also got no reverse mode, which is something that you might actually come across on certain other electric bikes. Now, while this might be trivial to certain individuals, I do think the omission of a push-to-cancel indicator is completely inexcusable, specifically at this price point. Sure enough, the same sort of comments were said about some other Super Soco bikes. Indeed, over here it means that you're going to have to manually do it every single time. And given the fact that the actual audible cue is not there either, and the fact that the LCD display has got a very small icon for the indicator, which can be a little bit hard to see, specifically in bright sunlit conditions, it means that you might actually sometimes forget to switch off the indicator. So therefore you'll actually have to get in a habit of always making sure that it's on its center position. So with all that in mind, it brings us on to our verdict. And truthfully, the TC Max does tick quite a few boxes, in that it is a fun-to-ride, comfortable electric bike that has got a decent electric range. With that said, it's not going to be appealing to everyone. For those people who want to go those longer distance journeys, then you're just going to probably have to look at a different electric bike or indeed a petrol bike instead. Similarly, when it comes to the overall performance, be it in terms of the brakes or in terms of the raw motor power, it's not going to compete with a regular 125. Now, the other things to also bear in mind before you do look at the TC Max is the fact its battery pack is really heavy. So if you do want to remove that on a regular basis, it's actually going to be quite a workout. Similarly, when it comes to charging it, the charger itself is rather noisy. Then you have got certain missing features, for example, the LCD with a lackluster amount of customization, and the fact that the push to cancel with indicators is not present is quite disappointing to say the least. Now, we'd be curious to know what you make of the TC Max down the comment section below. And of course, if you've liked this independent detailed review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.